Welcome to Tech for Founder podcast. I'm your host, Panida, and I'm thrilled to interview Luis Baez, a sales enablement strategist, consultant, and former Silicon Valley C-suite professional. Luis brings a wealth of experience from tech giants like LinkedIn, Google, Uber, and Tesla. Hailing from the Bronx and proud of his identity as a gay Puerto Rican American, Luis empowers business owners and employees for holistic growth. Currently the Global Director of Revenue Enablement at Deputy, Luis' insight goes beyond the boardroom. He's a published author and a trailblazer in scaling revenues and driving impactful transformations. Join us as Luis shares insights on entrepreneurship, leadership, diversity, and sales culture, offering strategies to cultivate entrepreneurial leaders for sustainable sales growth. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So could you start by explaining what entrepreneurship means and why it's important for businesses and startups and established organizations?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Entrepreneurship is a quality of mind and a culture, really, that enables and empowers people within a company to behave like owners of that company, where everyone has a stake in the business and everyone operates with that degree of self-accountability and self-motivation. This is something that I learned while working in Silicon Valley, working at startup environments and even companies that got bigger but still retained that sort of culture of entrepreneurship. And it really shifted the way that I showed up in the workplace, right? It was no longer a clock in, clock out job. I had real stake in the business. And in working in Silicon Valley, one of the things that the way that your compensation is structured is that you get equity in the company. And so I like to remind people that you literally own a piece of the company.
Definitely. I think that's a great perspective to have because not only it motivate the monetary rewards motivate you, but it also makes you feel like you own the company and you have this incentive to make it better.
Yes, absolutely.
So as someone who has worked in some of the biggest Silicon Valley startups, how have you seen entrepreneurial spirit contribute to innovation and growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when I think about my experience as an account executive on the sales floor, surrounded by other executives, there was always this urgency in elevating all of the customer needs. We were sharing with each other, this is happening in the marketplace. This is what I'm hearing. Customers are asking for this. We would then take that feedback and socialize it internally. We'd go to the product team and ask, hey, is it possible to make this update to the product? Or could we beta test with this customer? Right? Going to the marketing team and saying, hey, we're having challenges overcoming this objection. Could you run a campaign that helps to position our product against those objections? Right? And even thinking about, running through legal and finance. Hey, these customers prefer these payment terms and these contract terms. Could we possibly revisit the way that we structure our deals to meet the customer needs where they are? So that's an example of the way that all of that sort of energy and spirit and mindset manifested on the sales floor.
Definitely. So you're pretty much going between departments and helping make changes to the product because with tech, customer feedback is so important, user feedback and making sure that gets implemented into the product and having an entrepreneur drive that in a company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, someone who has a sense of urgency and sense of responsibility.
Definitely. So building an inclusive and performance-driven culture is essential for today's market. How can managers inspire their employees to become entrepreneurs and drive engagement within their teams?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think to take a step back, we have to look at the entire experience that someone has within a company. And working in sales in particular, some of the things that I consider are the recruitment process and the onboarding experience, right? Companies will traditionally source referrals from other employees to hire within a company. That can create this sort of echo chamber of the same kind of thinking and the same ideologies. And so if we want to be an inclusive space, we have to, really look at the way that we recruit people in the first place. The next step is when people do join the company, making sure that they have all the tools, all the knowledge, and all the resources to get their fair start at the starting line of their career. right? So we want to make sure that that experience is also inclusive, and also thinking about even the ways that people prefer to learn, making sure that the onboarding experience adopts different learning styles. And then when we think about the culture, right, managers need to create these examples of vulnerability, showing up to meetings and expressing the way that they manage stress, the way that they're handling the pressure, right, the way that they hold themselves accountable, right, and even thinking beyond that, creating spaces for other people to speak up and be vocal and to very vulnerably and openly share the things that they're up against in the field, the conversations and the tension within the company, the lack of resources, etc. That culture, that needs to be spearheaded by leadership.
Absolutely. I think something you mentioned about was vulnerability. And I think that's a very important topic because EQ is so important to ensure that employees are happy in the workplace and managers know what is going on as well, and making sure that employees don't leave without you knowing what happened, right? Like it could be stress or burnout. And have you had any experience managing issues related to stress and burnout? Because I think this is quite prevalent in the tech industry.
Oh gosh, if I can be very candid with you, I have personally experienced burnout to the point where it really negatively impacted my mental and physical health. I ended up in the emergency room with an IV in each arm because I was working 7 days a week, 12-hour days, trying to prove myself, trying to be the team player, wanting to exceed goals, wanting to go bigger in my career. I wanted to be a vice president, a chief revenue officer. I had really big aspirations. And all because I gave into the pressure. I didn't maintain boundaries. I didn't, set up time for rest for myself. I didn't prioritize those things. And in context, I'm someone that is, the first in my family to pursue an education, the first to, get an opportunity to work at these companies. And I was just so grateful for where I had arrived in my career that I just gave my best and gave my all to these businesses. And it is not healthy. It is not the way to operate. And it's also not necessary for success.
Definitely not. So, as someone who has been through these experiences, you would definitely be the person to know what's going on with employees and making sure that doesn't happen to them as well.
Absolutely. When I think about my interactions with direct reports, or when I think about even the businesses that I consult and the entrepreneurs and founders that I work with, right? One of the first things that we do in our conversations, it's like pause. Before we get into the numbers, how are you? Have you scheduled your workouts this week? Have you scheduled your therapy sessions? Have you, taken up any reading? Are you planning any travel? When's your next vacation? Let's get it on the calendar if you don't have one. Right? I think that we need to start conversations there because when we think about the hierarchy of needs, you cannot perform as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as an executive if your mind and your body aren't right. Right? Health is real wealth when we think about the long-term game.
Definitely, I think health as well is very important, and especially not only for you, but the performance of the company relies on the health of its employees
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So, what self work and framework have you developed that managers can use to become the leaders they've always wanted to be?
Huh. Gosh, I think I hinted at this already, right? Like focusing on your wellness first and foremost. When I sit with leaders, when I sit with founders and CEOs, and I always ask them, like, how are you spending the first hour of your day, the first 2 hours of your day? Knowing that the minute you reach for your phone or you reach for the laptop, you will be bulldozed and pulled in 50 directions and you won't have time to make that call, send that quick email, do that quick load of laundry or anything else for the day, right? You're not going to get a quick workout in. It's just not going to happen. So how are you investing upfront, right? Taking care of yourself. Beyond that, thinking about how are you enabling and empowering the people around you, right? If people are waiting for you to make decisions because they need permissions and approvals, you have to find ways to empower them. Get yourself out of the way so that other people can move faster and not rely on you, right? I think that also eliminates stressors and distractions, right? When you can create that kind of environment where people can just feel trusted to run with their piece of the work. And then thinking about your communication style, right? One of the best examples of leadership that I can think of was my very first job when I arrived in California. I'd been recruited to work at LinkedIn. I was part of a founding sales team of a new product line at the company. Our sales director walked in and had this traumatizing experience working in sales and advertising in New York, and was expecting to be drilled and grilled and, where are the numbers? What have you done today? Instead, my director walks in and she projects the laptop on the screen in the conference room for everyone to see. And it's her calendar. And it's really wild and color coded and super scattered. And she apologizes to everyone. I'm so sorry that I was 2 minutes late for this meeting. Here are all the things that I've got going on, all my priorities for the week, right? Here are the time blocks where I'm working out, taking my son to school, etc. And then here are the meetings for all these priorities that you asked about. This is when you can start to expect some of these things being delivered. It completely changed the tone, right? Because she held herself accountable and set the example for how she wanted everyone else to hold themselves accountable. And I want everyone to think about how they communicate as a leader.
I love that. I think having your entire calendar shown to everyone and showing how you take care of yourself, how you take care of other employees in the company. Yeah, I think leading by example is one of the best thing, right? Because if you just tell people, hey, take care of yourself, but you're not taking care of yourself, they probably won't.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you see someone that you admire, or someone that you look up to, or someone in a role that you want to step into someday, when you see them doing it well, that certainly inspires you.
Definitely. So we often hear about the importance of diversity and inclusion, especially in the tech industry. How does embedding a culture of respect for diversity and inclusion contribute to a sustainable sales culture?
That's an excellent question. I think that when I often engage with customers, they want to connect with people that they have things in common with, right? And they want to have these really streamlined experiences that are personalized and customized end to end. When I think about product design, right, I also think about the importance of ensuring that there are voices in the room that influence and ask questions around, are we creating opportunities for people to be biased? Are we creating experiences, that are completely negative? Have we made this accessible to everyone? Are we looking at language translation, right? And so these kinds of details and this kind of thinking can only happen when we have, the right sort of people in the room.
Yes.
So people that can represent every walk of life, every community that engages with that product or service, right, needs to have some sort of voice or influence. And so when we think about this culture in sales in particular, we need to make sure that people are equipped with not only, you mentioned emotional intelligence, there's not only the IQ and the EQ, I think there's also an element of cultural intelligence that people need to develop, that capacity for connecting with people that are vastly different than you and being able to have a productive conversation with desired outcomes, right? That ability to facilitate safe conversations and safe spaces, I think that's another thing that is often overlooked. And so we have to think about coaching and training people for that capacity. Because I think about experiences where I've stepped into companies and have engaged with executives that hang up on customers because they don't understand their accent or, they don't understand, what the need is. We have to coach them to learn to listen actively in those situations rather than hanging up the phone on the customer and creating terrible experiences.
Definitely. I think cultural intelligence is definitely should be put alongside IQ and EQ. And yeah, and making sure that there's someone in the room to represent the people that you are serving is so important because you can't exactly guess what a community wants until you have been in that community.
Precisely. Active listening is important.
Yes. So you've had experience working with both established businesses and online business owners. How can these different type of businesses benefit from adopting an entrepreneurial approach?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. When I think about an early stage business, I actually think about the pressure that is mounted on the founder, right? And, I have to do it all. I have to know it all. Everyone depends on me, everything, and even as you're making your first hires, that anxiety of oh, letting go of the steering wheel, letting go of this project. I built this. This is my baby. I hope they're good to it, right? I often remind people that when you are a founder, you are salesperson number one and you are leader number two, meaning that in order for your business to grow, you have to be able to take your vision, communicate that, and transfer that energy and that intention to one other person that will then run and lead the rest of the team, right? While you remain salesperson number one, you're off to shake hands, get investors, speak at events, etc. Those are all in the vein of selling the company, right? So I think that it's really critical to think about it, to grow beyond those early stages. You have to inspire other entrepreneurs in the company with that sense of responsibility, with that accountability to that vision, and being very clear about what's expected of them and all the ways that they can color outside the lines and getting their jobs done. Right? That's going to be empowering for you and also for the business. Now, larger organizations can certainly benefit from, when you get too big, too fast. The concern is the quality of the relationships with the customer and the experiences they're having, and making sure that it's a high quality experience at scale. And so if you have a thought process, a method, and a culture that is fine tuned to make sure that every aspect of the customer's experience is personalized, and you train people to show up with a level of confidence and executive presence, that customer deserves, and you standardize that performance, you start to see magic. So I think that entrepreneurship is applicable no matter what stage of your business. It's just a matter of fine tuning what that looks like for your stage of business.
Definitely. I think, especially with late stage businesses and startups, they go through this point that if they're at the point where they stop personalizing with customers, they're going to run into issues and not having that feedback. And I think what you said about entrepreneurship is so important to ensure that that issue doesn't happen and they continue to have the magic of a very early stage startup where the founders would just call customers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, as a sales executive and consultant, you've built and grown top performing sales teams. What strategies have you found most effective in nurturing a successful sales team?
Yeah. Two things that need to happen in tandem. One is leadership coaching, right? We have to make sure that our leaders are prepared to be good coaches themselves in order to sustain the culture and in order to support the growth of the team. I think that also what needs to happen in tandem with the teams is tribal knowledge is so important. We often will tap someone's shoulder. Hey, where do I find this? Hey, where do I find that? So leaning into people's way of learning and adapting on the sales floor or the virtual sales floor, thinking about creating coaching programs that bring people together to, influence some of that tribal knowledge, and then thinking about listening and capturing that information and standardizing that into playbooks. And so when I step into a team and we're just getting started, right, we'll have role specific coaching sessions. I'll just sit with business development representatives, coach them up on their day to day, go through their pipeline and some of their needs separately from the account executives. And even with the account executives, I'll break them up into industry or segment or however the teams are structured. These really hyper focused conversations make sure that, we're all sharing the right intelligence about the things that we've got going on. And then my role is to then adopt that intelligence. Oh, that email really worked for outbound prospecting. Let me see that email. Right? Let's go ahead and share that with the rest of the team and see if we can replicate success. Right? Let's add this to the playbook. So those are the things that need to happen in tandem. Leaders that are good coaches and, a culture around that sort of tribal knowledge.
Definitely. I think having very hyper focused meetings are definitely helpful because then it's exactly what works for each department and being able to improve sales with that knowledge.
Absolutely.
So, how do you align the goals of sales teams with the overall business strategy to ensure that everyone is working towards the same objective?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We look at, let's say, a business is planning on a quarterly basis. We look at the quarterly goals. Our goals, might be, let's say, more customers or expanding into a new region, improving our, net promoter score, and looking at, the launch of a new product, right? And so on our end, we have to look at, okay, these are the top company goals. What are the skills and the behaviors that our reps need to exhibit in alignment with these goals, right? They need to have the skill for demonstrating the product that we're launching, right? They have to have the skill for capturing, the feedback, launching initiatives to improve net promoter scores, etc. We map things out back to those specific goals, and then we run training and coaching around that. We'll leverage, coaching sessions to role play, mock calls, mock, drill sort of situations. And then we also, layer that with self-paced learning so people can, again, consume content on their own pace and in their own ways, whether it be video or text, right? You have to think about that the way that people consume information and retain, but always focused on applicable learning, right? Like, it's not just retaining information. It's, we're going to do the mock calls. We're also going to listen in on calls. We use tools in the industry. They're called revenue intelligence tools. Chorus.ai, Gong are two very popular solutions. They, in the background, record and transcribe and analyze your sales calls, right? And
Wow.
we, as coaches and consultants, can step in, listen to the calls, and give you, really personalized and tailored feedback to say, hey, great job introducing this new product. Next time, try introducing this feature. You missed out on it. And I think that was important to the customer.
I like that. I think the fact that you are able to tailor learning and giving feedback to your team is very important. And I think, especially what you said about having content that is digestible and also making sure that it helps that particular person because everyone learns differently. So,
Yeah.
what kind of learning styles have you faced that you felt like this person cannot learn this way and I should adapt to this way instead?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I remember one rep in particular who told me that they had a preference for learning on the fly. Just throw me on the call, let me make the mistakes, let me learn from the mistakes, let me just dive in and let me just do it. They were very bullish as they were getting started in their career. What I came to realize is that they were someone that exhibited, an attention deficit disorder. And, I wasn't in a position to ask, but they eventually ended up disclosing that to me. Right. And so what we came up with was a more personalized learning plan that included not only the sort of practical, tactical, tangible learning, but also really parsed it down into these chunkable videos and sort of talk tracks. So we had, the content available for in a self-paced sort of environment. And we brought that back and we tailored the coaching program. We modified their program for their first 2 weeks to emphasize that blend of self-paced and practical learning. Again, we will always look at when someone joins a team, how do you prefer to learn? How do you prefer to engage? Right? And we'll tailor your onboarding plan around that. But we have to be able to optimize as we see the way that you consume and digest information and as we learn about your learning style.
Definitely. And I love the fact that your team member felt comfortable enough to disclose their very specific learning difficulties and you made sure that was tailored towards them.
Yeah, it's very important. This is when we were talking about like, what does it mean to create an inclusive, sort of culture? This is an example of that. It's not just about the visible distinctions of people. It's also about that sort of neuro diversity as well that we often can't see. And so, you have to create that space for people to come forward and disclose what they need to succeed and contribute at their highest.
Definitely, I love that. So, in your experience, what are some common challenges that business owners face when trying to cultivate an entrepreneurial spirit, and how can they overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I think the first one is hesitation. Oh, we've never done this way, right? I come from an old way of doing things, and we don't give people permission to think for themselves and manage their own schedules. I was at my desk at 9 a.m. every day, 8:30. If I really wanted that promotion, we've got to let go, right? There's no space for old ways of doing things if we're talking and committing to innovation, right? I think the other
Definitely.
thing is that we have so many examples of companies that have thrived, that have established entrepreneurial cultures and have thrived and have gone public and are multi-billion, multinational companies, right? And so I think that, hesitation between like, oh, we used to do this and that isn't possible. We need to address that up front. Those are the mindsets that will keep the culture from shifting. I think the other thing is that, it's a matter of making sure that the leadership is ready and that they are truly capable of being good coaches and stewards of the culture, right? That is the most critical thing, is beyond getting buy-in from leadership to move in this direction. It's also getting buy-in in the approach, because they want to immediately, we have to train our sales reps. We have to, this is impacting our revenue. We need immediate ROI. And it's counterintuitive to slow down and train the leaders first, right? But it's critical. You
Yeah.
can't infuse culture and sustain culture if the people around it aren't protecting it.
That's very interesting about what you said about training the leader, because so would that mean that, for example, that you would have to go and train the founder to ensure that they are able to lead the team towards entrepreneurship? So is that what you are doing?
Yeah, that is certainly some of the work that I do, right? Like, how do we establish the right channels of communication, the right standard operating procedures? How do we, reframe the way that you conduct your one-on-one sessions, right? One of the things that I mentioned earlier in this conversation is one of the first things I do in conversations is focus on wellness and belonging first and foremost, right? So getting that founder to slow down, as eager as they are to get into the numbers, we've got an investment meeting, we've got pause, right? If we're really trying to shift the culture, then you have to be intentional and you have to prioritize that question up front. And so that's some of the work that we do, right? Making sure that the founder is operating, at that level of entrepreneurship, that they can then set that example. And always, again, with that framework of their salesperson number one, nurturing leader number one.
I love the words of nurturing leader. I think it doesn't sound too intimidating, because I think just the word leader, it's like, oh my God, it's
Yeah.
gonna tell me what to do. But nurturing leader is like, hey, like, how's your day? And then this is what you should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always a way to be productive while also humanizing the experience that we're having.
Definitely. So we are running out of time for today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Absolutely. I appreciate you for having me. And thank you for the questions and for creating a safe space for me.